Welcome to the Archive, Guardian. I am Mimir, an archival mind, tasked with procuring and curating the largest collection of records and data on all things within our universe. I have been given a secondary directive, to share my knowledge as necessary with others. Some parts of these records will be narrated by myself, or other synthetically created voices. Any audio records that we have been able to recover will be included within the documentation. Now that we have our introductions out of the way, I welcome you to today's installment. Document ID hash 612023, also known as the Unveiling Lorebook, History. These entries were procured during the attack on the Hive stronghold known as the Shadow Keep, located on Earth's moon. While we have records of their existence, little acknowledgement of this has been recorded. The final entry in this book does contain direct correspondence from Eris Morn, and some Guardians claim that she was the first known provider of these documents. Other notable information. Most of these entries seem to be metaphorical or allegorical in nature, and their existence should not be taken as outright fact. Document 1, pleased to meet you.
One of your philosophers said, "It is not to be thought that the life of darkness is sunk in misery and lost in sorrow. There is no sorrow, for sorrow is a thing that is swallowed up in death, and death and dying are the very life of the darkness." He was a shoemaker. He was right, and it matters more than anything. According to him, the visible world is a manifestation of eternal light and eternal darkness, and it is in eternal opposition that eternity has revealed itself. The fall was necessary for creation to escape its first imperfect stasis and seek a truer form. Heresy? Well then, I am the heresiarch. The philosopher died of a bowel disease. Those who do not exist cannot suffer and are of no account to any viable ethics. If the true path to goodness is the elimination of suffering, then only those who must exist can be allowed to exist. It is the nature of life to favor existence over non-existence, and to prefer the fertile soil to the poisoned wind, because those who open their mouths to that wind pass from the world and leave no descendant, whether of flesh or of thought. But imagine the abomination of a world where nothing can end, and no choice can be preferred to any other. Imagine the things that would suffer and never die. Imagine the lies that would flourish without context or corrective. Imagine a world without me.
Document 2, Gardener and Winnower.
Once upon a time, a gardener and a winnower lived together in a garden. It was once before a time because time had not yet begun. We did not live. We existed as principles of ontological dynamics that emerged from mathematical structures, as bodiless and inevitable as the primes. It was the field of possibility that prefigured existence. They existed because they had to exist. They had no antecedent and no constituents, and there is no instrument of causality by which they could be portioned into components and assigned to some schematic of their origin. If you followed the umbilical of history in search of some ultimate atavistic embryo that became them, you would end your journey marooned here in this garden. In the morning, the gardener pushed seeds down into the wet loam of the garden to see what they would become. In the evening, the winnower reaped the day's crop and separated what would flourish from what had failed. The day was longer than all of time, and the night was swifter than a glint of light on a falling sugar crystal. Insects buzzed between the flowers, and worms slithered between the roots, feeding on what was and what might be, the first gradient in existence, the first dynamo of life. Rain fell from no sky. Voices spoke without mouth or meaning. A tree of silver wings bloomed, yielded fruit, shed feathers, bloomed again. In the day between the morning and the evening, the gardener and the winnower played a game of possibilities.
Document 3, the Flower Game.
These are the rules of a game. Let it be played upon an infinite two-dimensional grid of flowers. Rule 1. A living flower with less than 2 living neighbors is cut off. It dies. Rule 2. A living flower with 2 or 3 living neighbors is connected. It lives. Rule 3. A living flower with more than 3 living neighbors is starved and overcrowded. It dies. Rule 4. A dead flower with exactly 3 living neighbors is reborn. It springs back to life. The only play permitted in the game is the arrangement of the initial flowers. This game fascinates kings. This game occupies the very emperors of thought. Though it has only 4 rules, and the board is a flat, featureless grid, In it you will find changeless blocks, stoic as iron and beacons and whirling pulsars, as well as gliders that soar out to infinity, and patterns that lay eggs and spawn other patterns, and living cells that replicate themselves wholly. In it you may construct a universal computer with the power to simulate very slowly any other computer imaginable, and thus simulate whole realities, including nested copies of the flower game itself. And the game is undecidable. No one can predict exactly how the game will play out except by playing it, and yet this game is nothing compared to the game played by the gardener and the winnower. It resembles that game as a seed does a flower. No, as a seed resembles the star that fed the flower and all the life that made it. In their game, the gardener and the winnower discovered shapes of possibility. They foresaw bodies and civilizations, minds and cognitions, qualia and suffering. They learned the rules that governed which patterns would flourish in the game, and which would dwindle. They learned those rules because they were those rules. And in time, the gardener became vexed.
Document 4. The final shape.
It always ends the same.
The gardener complained.
This one stupid pattern.
Aren't they beautiful, I asked, as the flowers opened and closed in patterns beyond the scope of entire universes to encode, all devouring and perhaps everlasting. Not even we could know whether a pattern in the flowers would cycle forever or someday halt.
They're as dull as carbon monoxide poisoning.
The gardener groused, although carbon monoxide did not yet exist, and neither did anything that could be poisoned. The gardener kneeled to flick a patch of sod with their trowel. It struck an open flower, causing it to shut. Although I was the closer of flowers and that was my sole purpose, I felt no fear or jealousy. We had our assigned dominions and always would. They're majestic, I said. They have no purpose except to subsume all other purposes. There is nothing at the center of them except the will to go on existing, to alter the game to suit their existence. They spare not one sliver of their totality for any other work. They are the end. The pattern corrected the errant flower effortlessly. The great flow went on unchanged. The gardener got up and brushed their knees.
Every game we play, this one pattern consumes all the others. Wipes out every interesting development. A stupid, boring exploit that cuts off entire possibility spaces from ever arising. There's so much that we'll never get to see because of this pest.
They chewed at their cracked lip, which existed only because this is an allegory.
I'm going to do something about it,
they said.
We need a new rule.
Administrator notes.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is... well, that's not important. You can call me the Administrator. My purpose here is to manage and maintain Mimir's storage and information archival systems. In addition to this, I've been given a secondary task. This task is to assist Mimir with his secondary directive. I'll be providing any additional context and analytical services required to uncover some deeper ideas behind each archived document. Today's documents are part of a collection known as the Unveiling. This was a group of texts recovered while fighting the Scarlet Brood on the Moon by the Guardian, also known by their hidden VIP identifier, VIP 2014. These texts are mostly allegorical in nature and are not to be taken literally. After analysis, we are unsure if these events did happen. It is important to note who the narrator of this story is and what their intentions are. While the narrator is never explicitly mentioned, we are given a few key insights as to their identity. Within the text, we are introduced to the narrator as well as the gardener and the winnower. Here is our first clue as to who wrote these passages. The narrator describes the gardener and the winnower as we. This seems to indicate that we are directly being reasoned with by one of the fundamental forces that we have become accustomed to discussing within philosophical arguments. Reviewing the text prior to the narrator giving us the first glimpse of their hand shows that we are potentially in communication with the winnower. Thirdly, and what seems to confirm this identification, is that all text, apart from direct quotes from the gardener, are written in the same rhythm, style, and most importantly, without quotes, even when directly conversing with the gardener. Now that we understand who seems to be taking up the mantle of our academic benefactor today, we can continue with our analysis of this text. Within the first passage, it becomes blatantly clear that the Winnower is attempting to reason with us. It understands how our species perceives it, and it would like nothing more than to flip that perception on its head. It reasons that the darkness eases pain and suffering, darkness here seemingly referring to the darkness that death brings to mortal life. As well, it asks us to imagine a world without itself. In this case, it seems to be taking on the direct personification of death. In other words, it would like us to imagine a world without death. It should be noted that many people are used to a phrase such as imagine a world without death and suffering. While this is similar, it is crucial to realize that the Winnower has intentionally left out the word suffering from this common phrase. It wants us to imagine a world where natural death is not possible. I would like to note here that due to recent communication with an ally on Titan, the Guardian has discovered the possible origin story of the Witness and its motivation. Many have theorized that this text is written by the Witness, but due to these recent revelations and the context clues within these passages, it is clearer than ever that the Witness is simply an entity that has twisted a natural trend of the universe as its one true purpose. The Witness was a race that was blessed by the Traveler and thus had everything that they could possibly want. It's possible that they were even able to develop immortality from natural death. Due to this, it was revealed that they searched the cosmos for purpose. As they attempted to find purpose, it was possible, but never directly stated, that they discovered the origins of the light and the dark. We will come back to the ideals and goals of the Witness, but they have seen what immortality can do to a species, and they believe that without the embrace of death, life has no meaning. Many times throughout the text, the Winnower refers to a garden. It is widely believed that this is not a physical place, but is just another allegorical tool to describe the universe that the Gardener and Winnower play their game in. This seems to bear no connection to the Black Garden, although we know so little about it that it is hard to be certain of anything. Given some recent study by researchers from Neomuna, the portal that the Witness was able to escape through after the recent invasion of Earth's orbit may be an Einstein-Rosen bridge. This is theoretically able to link space-time in a way that could enable a sort of time travel. All efforts to traverse the portal have failed, however many theorize that the Witness could be using this portal to travel through time and space to the Garden. So far, these are merely theories and there is little evidence. The Winnower also references a particularly important paracausal formation. This would be referring to the Tree of Silver Wings. This formation is believed to be a construct of ruinous nature and seems to feed off the paracausal energy of both light and dark. Very little is known about it, but one existed in the cradle on Io prior to the Witness taking the moon. Another has recently grown in an unlikely place. This tree was seemingly planted by the Traveler when it was able to directly hit the Witness's pyramid ship with a terraforming beam. During the Guardian's assault on the pyramid ship, they were able to document it sprouting and growing during their fight against a newly resurrected disciple, the final god of pain, Nezarec. Continuing on, the Winnower describes a game that the Gardener and itself play in the garden. This game is actually called Conway's Game of Life. It is meant to simulate the economics of life and how societies and communities can form and dissolve based on their size, location, and needs. They describe that they played a version of this game that resembles what we know now, but on a vastly separate scale. For instance, our version of the flower game is limited as it is possible to create groups of flowers that continuously reform or that never die. In reality, the universe trends towards entropy, and as such, these groups of flowers would eventually die off, even if they were in the optimal configuration. They would eventually run out of usable energy and starve. It seems that the Gardener and Winnower play many of these games, possibly countless, but it's noted that the Gardener has become vexed by it. Now, what we're talking about here is not the silicon-based murder robots that we know of as the Vex. Instead, they mean that the Gardener has become disillusioned in their purpose. They are tired of playing the same game over and over. In part, this is due to their purpose in the game. The Gardener opens the flowers, and the Winnower closes the flowers. The Gardener breathes life into the universe, and the Winnower takes it away. In our simple version of this game, they would be entirely equal. There would eventually be patterns that would develop into eternal bastions of life, but in the game that the Gardener and the Winnower play, the game always trends to a specific pattern. The Winnower gives us the first hint as to what this pattern represents when it describes the Gardener's rant about being tired that it always ends the same. The Winnower describes the Gardener accidentally closing a flower, but the Winnower says that the great flow went on unchanged. This shows that no matter what the gardener or the winnower do, in the short term, they are unable to affect the pattern. As well, this passage is titled The Final Shape. It is my belief that this pattern is the final shape, and the only pattern that fits within this description is that of the heat death of the universe. This theory states that due to entropy, all energy in the universe will eventually even out, and the universe will thus become unable to sustain life. No more stars will be able to be born, no more life will be able to survive, and nothing will be able to change. This pattern of equilibrium would erase all patterns before it, and it would be completely unavoidable given conventional physics. Finally, the gardener announces that they need a new rule. This rule would allow the universe to never die. It would allow life to exist where it shouldn't be able to, but it would require a fundamental ignorance of basic universal physics. It would require physical mechanics outside of causality constantly acting on the universe. It would break the biological rule of Darwinism and foster life that should not be able to exist, and allow this life to exist far beyond what should be natural. The witness sees this as the ultimate sin, and has taken it upon itself to bring about the final shape. While we are still uncertain what this exactly means, it would at the very least require the removal of paracausal forces from our universe, or the end of the universe as we know it.